Sweden. This line along the Dnieper River has been a battlefield. Europe has actually conquered Russia more than Russia's ever conquered Europe. My question is, when I look at all these countries lined up, the only one that doesn't seem to belong is us. And are we destabilizing effect more than allowing this thing to run out on its own? And that's basically the question. What are we doing there?
I think history pretty much shows that we stand in between tyranny and freedom. And I think we continue to play that role, and we always have, and we do now. Russia's not looking at liberating Ukraine. They're looking at dominating and taking away free choice and sovereignty after having agreed by treaty not to do so. Not only is our influence needed and important, but it certainly, I think, is a leadership role in that it allows people to have the confidence to stand up. When nations feel weak, they feel like they have less choices, and standing together and standing then with the United States gives them that ability to stand up for freedom.
Yeah. I think that people did doubt, the U.S. commitment, perhaps during the times I mentioned at the outset, right, when we were looking for a mission, again, a new mission for NATO. That's not the case anymore. And what's interesting to mention back here at home, and I think probably Representative Turner noticed the same thing. This aggressiveness by the Russians and this focus on our Europe allies has really, I think, lifted up the diaspora back home in our districts across the country. People that are coming from these countries that have families still there, that have tradition with those countries, their voices are speaking up louder at home in our districts, and I think that's an encouraging sign as well.
Yeah, I think obviously there's a deterrent aspect of having an alliance, because we talked about capabilities earlier, and it's always very important to have in a security alliance. Put your money where your mouth is, right? We would like to see additional capabilities, but there is a deterrent aspect of having an alliance and having the U.S. and Canada, non-European nations, in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I think sends a signal to Russia in terms of whether or not they can take action and whether it's advisable for them to do so.
Right. The talk coming out of Wales, how the mobilization can be accelerated to a couple of days if necessary, where any kind of military force is needed, as well as, I think, the commitment and the pledges that came forward to step up to the plate. Those are all signs of us working together and taking their threats seriously.
And add just one thing to this. I think one other thing that's been very important in this whole dialogue is to understand that we have pursued a false narrative with respect to Russia. And General Breedlove just recently said it. He said, they are not our partner. NATO, even at one point, made the statement that it has no adversaries. Well, clearly, an adversary is someone who defines themselves as such, and Russia has now defined itself clearly as an adversary. And the signs and signals that have been coming were ignored, where they would violate territorial waters, airspace, the military buildup. All of the signs were excused. And even now, and I was very disappointed, the president would not formally declare that Russian tanks crossing the border into Ukraine is an invasion. Well, of course it's an invasion. They're not on a tourist visa. They are absolutely there on a military action violating the territorial integrity of the Ukraine. I think as we look to what our responsibilities are, part of it is to accurately state and see what's happening so our policies can reflect a response to that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, just because they're coming in without any emblems at all doesn't really fool anyone. Right. I think they're just trying to leverage that. They have their old tactic that goes back maybe to the Second World War, where they'll come in and try and disrupt things civilly, but it's actually military action, and we'll call it as it is. It gives them the opportunity, I think, to have deniability, but clearly, I think everyone is aware of what's going on, and that remains a threat.
Yeah. The gentleman in the back, please.
Yes, hi, Mark Tavlaris, the Podesta Group. Could you talk a little about Azerbaijan's role in providing energy security to Europe through the planned Southern Gas Corridor?
Well, that's going to be very important. As Representative Keating was talking about diversification, source diversification is really important. That's a major undertaking. The United States, of course, has been very supportive of that process. And again, as this gets completed, it is going to give that leverage for Europe to look at, again, those reverse flows issues. How are they going to be providing gas to each other and through Europe? But also ways in which they can lessen the overall influence both in price and supply from Russia.
Yeah, and that'll have an economic impact as well, because we're looking at this many times as our reliance on Russia, or Europe's reliance on Russia, rather, for energy. Well, they're a tremendous market, too. And as these other alternatives come into play, I think hopefully the Russian people will understand this is a loser's game for their economy as well, so that as we get alternatives, I think they're going to be more pressured economically.
And we have to also be concerned with, as we see Russia's new aggressiveness and what they're doing with Ukraine, what has happened with Estonia, with additional threats, we need to make certain that Russia is deterred, or we might be in a situation where moves like Azerbaijan become somewhat irrelevant as Russia makes looks to incorporate portions of that whole area.
Yeah, it was interesting as Anders Rasmussen was looking at his time as secretary, that they harkened back to the time that when he first was there, they were talking about building a relationship with Russia and how things have changed, just to show how quickly things have.
Indeed. If I could make it maximally impossible for our staff here, if I could call on the gentleman here in the front row. Thanks.
Thank you. Archie Gigishita, Ambassador of Georgia. First, very shortly, I just would like to state that Georgia owes its freedom and independence to the friendship and partnership that we've been enjoying with the United States over the 2 decades. And I'm very much thankful to our two friends, Congressman Keating and Turner, for being staunch supporters for Georgia, and everyone in this town who supports our cause. And no less importantly, the developments in and around Ukraine, which is very much worrisome, including for us, and probably we are one of the most vulnerable to these developments in the region. My question would be the following, that this morning I learned that on the Senate side there is a bipartisan effort, and then a bill was introduced entitled the Ukraine Freedom Support Act, which speaks about increased support to Ukraine in many terms, including military and other terms. And among others, in its section 7, it says that Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova are designated as a major non-NATO ally country for the United States, which of course will resonate back to Georgia and Moldova and Ukraine, I expect so. And my question would be whether or not on the House side you would consider the same bill to be prepared and passed. Thank you.
If I could turn to Mr. Keating first as the European subcommittee.
Yes, I think that our days are running out in this session, and we have many challenges. So there's a logistical side of that. But I think it's important that that issue was surfaced by the time we left, and it's something I think that will cause discussion, and I think we'll be able to deal with that issue. The question is, within what time frame? But the fact that that came forward, I think, is a strong message. And I think it will be followed up in discussion in the House. The question is, when will that be?
There were a number of bills that were introduced in the House with respect to Ukraine. I introduced one calling for major military assistance for the Ukraine, including strategic advice, intelligence sharing, military equipment. Unfortunately, there's not been, the administration's been slow to allow a coordinated effort for even Ukraine to understand or get the military strategic advice that might enhance their success from us. But I enjoyed the concept of your statement of designating nations as significant allies, even absent NATO membership. And certainly I think that's something we could look at, perhaps incorporating in some of the bills that are currently moving.
Yeah. The designation, as many of you may know, of being a major non-NATO ally has far-reaching ramifications, and it's something to consider very carefully moving forward. Next question, if I could call on that gentleman. Yes, please. Oh. Okay. We'll get to you in a moment, sir. You want to? The tyranny of the podium, sorry. Back there.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. My name is Ye Jiang. I'm a research fellow in Shanghai Institute for International Studies. At the moment, I'm a visiting fellow here in this good institute, CSIS. My question is that under the new situation now, it seems that the old dream that expand the West several years ago here in the United States, you thought that there would be a expand West that Russia can be in, but now the dream is over. So do you think that at this moment the United States will change the pivotal strategy to the Pacific and then re-pivotal to the Atlantic oceans? Thank you very much. And whether you will suggest the administration to change their mind to re-pivot again. Thank you very much.
Before I ask the gentleman to my left to answer that question, we're not allowed to use the word pivot anymore. It is a strategic rebalance, right? So I guess the question is that the executive branch and the administration announced a rebalancing towards Asia back in 2012. Recent events with Russia, has that will that have implications for that rebalance, or what amount of attention will we pay to the European theater?
Well, I think that when Secretary Kerry became Secretary of State, he went to Europe, and I think that was a very important signal, because I just never viewed the alliance with Europe as something that we were moving away from in the first place. And indeed, when you look at the fact that free trade agreement, the TTIP agreement, over half the world's GDP could come from that alliance. There was always that. I don't view it, with the questioner, I don't view it as a situation where the United States shifted back. I prefer to view it, even though issues weren't in the headlines, that our interest was always there. And this is just, reinforces that.
The whole pivot or rebalance, I mean, isn't that one of those great foreign policy faux pas, in that it's the type of statement that concerns both sides. No one, whether you're being pivoted from or to, or rebalanced from or to, are happy with the description. The reality is that it's really a misplaced type of focus. It gives the understanding that perhaps there's a limitation on our focus, and that we can neglect one area for the other. There should not be any scales of attention. All of these areas bear our attention, and they certainly, if you look at the hotspots that are there, our interests that are there, I think a redoubling of our efforts, perhaps in all areas, should be more of our focus than an issue of looking at competing interests.
Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for 2 questions at a time, since we are running short on time. And if we can go to this gentleman up here,
Got 2 fingers
and
up.
then we will ask for that 2-finger gentleman in the center aisle.
Thank you very much. My name is Stefan Groby. I'm with Euronews, European Television. Tomorrow is the referendum in Scotland. Do you see this as a potential threat to the alliance, in terms of, the alliance can be weakened if suddenly we have to focus on internal things? There's the Trident issue in Great Britain, but there's also the possible impact that this can trigger on countries like Belgium, Spain, etc. So what's your take on this? Thank you.
Okay, and before we answer that question, this gentleman in the middle with the green tie.
Good morning. Rob Tim from the National Defense University. I would just like to ask the gentleman, in light of President Poroshenko's visit to Canada and the United States this week, what would you offer as the 1 or 2 most important areas in which the international community in general, or the United States in particular, could be assisting the new Ukrainian government that's not currently being done.
Okay. So first on Scotland, Mr. Keating?
I think that, and I hope that that doesn't occur myself, and I think having the site of the conference, the NATO conference in Wales, to show the economic impact of that. So my hope is that that won't occur. If it does, I think it's something that commentators will overstate. There'll be a great deal of people that have opinions, but will it change things significantly? No, not in terms of our alliances. But I hope and trust it doesn't occur.
Well, what a failure of communication this will be if this does occur, because I think that vote will be taken under an understanding that their status would not change within NATO, that their status would not change within the EU, and the ramifications both from a military standpoint and from an economic standpoint are extreme. When you think you're getting something new, but you get to keep what you have, it's more difficult to dissuade you from taking that step. But I think they don't realize the real losses that will occur. And certainly it would be a loss, I think, to the alliance and certainly to the West. The amount of uncertainty that would fall upon both the EU, NATO, and certainly the UK will be just staggering.
And the economic loss as well.
Yeah. And with respect to the upcoming visit, it's interesting. The president has come forward and asked in this CR for Congress to approve training and equipping Syrian rebels, while stating that he has, full military authority, he believes, to do what he's going to set out for our military in Syria and Iraq. He's likely to receive support and have the support of the American public for taking that action. What's interesting is we don't get to vote on the reverse of those decision making. This president has made a decision not to actively provide support to the Ukraine that I believe Congress would vote to provide. I believe the House and the Senate would absolutely vote to support military assistance to the Ukraine at a level that's much higher than this president is doing. And I think that's part of the symbolism of the visit that we're having, is that it's a statement by Congress that we are support, that we do have strong support for the Ukraine and for involvement with the Ukraine.